Thank you everyone for joining this webinar with Don Kessler and James Lauer from Monitor EDU. I'm Nathan Thompson from Assessment Systems, and we'll be talking about how to make your remote proctoring a success by preparing yourself and your candidates, making sure that you have everything set up ahead of time that maximizes the probability of everything going smoothly. So we'll start off with a couple introductions and then go through a list of talking points. I've got a PowerPoint here that I'll share, but it's just a few slides, mainly to keep track of our talking points and so on. It's not like we're going to just have a straight presentation. So here's my screen. All right, Don, James, you see it all right?
I do.
Perfect.
Okay, we'll start out with some introductions on assessment systems and Monitor EDU. So hello, everyone. I'm Nathan Thompson, CEO and co-founder of Assessment Systems. I'm a psychometrician, but what I like to do is build software for psychometricians and other assessment professionals. So I don't do as much on the consulting side, but I'd rather build an online assessment platform that allows organizations to build, deliver, and psychometrically validate their assessments more easily. And as part of that, a lot of my organizations need proctoring services. And with that, I've partnered with Monitor EDU for a lot of my high stakes clients. And I'll let Don and James introduce themselves.
Sure. Thanks, Nate. Yep. Don Kastner, president of Monitor EDU. For those who know me, I've been in the industry almost since the beginning. I think when we first dabbled with remote proctoring, there might have been one or two companies that were starting to dabble with it. So this goes back to 2008. I came out of higher ed. I was running an online university at that point in time when we developed a solution. So as you can see on the slide, 15 years experience, not 60 as was on our original slide there, Nate. That was so I'm not 60 yet, so that would be impossible. Getting close, but not there yet. But yeah, and I came out of higher ed. I also taught at San Jose State University, so I've seen that side of it. I've seen the in classroom testing side, and as Nate points out, Monitor EDU is my second proctoring company. So certainly very committed to the assessment industry and testing and proctoring and know a bit about it, and happy to help where I can. So I'll turn it over to James.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, James Lauer. I have about, coming up on 10 years of experience in the remote testing industry, which is, time flies by when you're having fun testing. I've had the opportunity to work kind of in the before, the during, and the after with testing. Been able to see what it's like to work in content creation, been able to be a part of the experience, and then delivering out this content. And then lastly, it's landed me with opportunity to show the final part of the online testing, which is the proctoring services of it. So Nate has been a fantastic partnership. He handles pretty much the front two parts of those, and we handle the back part, which is together forming a really nice relationship that's been fruitful over the last couple of years. And it's given a very well-balanced approach for me to be able to see kind of what goes into the testing experience, because when you're familiar with the position where someone's been on either the content creation or how they're delivering it, it really makes it a little bit easier to understand what can be some proctoring needs and also at the same time some concerns, which we'll talk about shortly.
Thanks, James. So a little bit about the companies themselves. Assessment Systems, like I mentioned before, primarily provides software. So we've got software platforms for item banking, exam delivery, processing, registration payments, essay scoring, both human and automated AI essay scoring, and automated psychometric analytics. So that after you deliver an exam and you need to do a year-end statistical report to deliver to accreditation authorities or anything like that, it will automatically produce those reports for you.
Yep, and then Monitor EDU, we're a partner with Assessment Systems. In fact, we're not only a partner, we're also a client, because we license their software for some of our smaller clients to administer the tests as well. But our focus really is on live proctoring. We call it human intelligence, thing that's been around for a long time, to really be able to manage and monitor that testing session. Probably about 70 to 80% of our business is really in professional testing and high stakes exams. Only 20 to 30% is that traditional higher ed or lately we've done a lot in the high school market as well, so that K through 12 market. But our specialty really is in the higher stakes exams and really managing that. And a lot of what we're going to talk about today relates to that, because you see a lot more of the higher stakes exams being live proctored. And our experience over the years in that area really gave us some ideas on how we can help people prepare for that, those sessions.
Done. So we'll start by getting into a list of some of the common issues that happen with. Looks like I pasted in.
Yep.
The same thing twice. Sorry. Where did that go?
No worries, Dave. I got my cheat sheet out. So.
Okay. Go ahead. Let's talk about the common issues.
Yeah. So I mean, if you think about it, when you're getting into remote proctoring and thinking about it, I mean, this focus is really how do you assure that everybody who shows up to test can test. If you think about a test center, if you go to a test center or you go to a classroom and you meet all the requirements, you're going to take that exam. It's going to be rare when you're not able to test. But with online testing and remote testing, that hasn't always been the case. There's a number of barriers that exist that prevent candidates from being able to test when they're supposed to test, right? And that can get frustrating for everybody. That creates a lot of inefficiency in the process. It creates issues with validity. It creates a number of issues that you're all very familiar with. But the things that get in the way, typically, first let's start with technical issues. That's probably the most common, because you're relying on people to test on their own equipment. Their level of technical competence is going to vary widely. A lot of times that happens by age and experience, but it also happens by industry. We test in many industry. We work with a lot of physicians. They're not focused on computer technology. They're focused on other technologies. And so, their level of expertise may be much, much lower in terms of being familiar with how to navigate the technology and the technological demands. We talked, scheduling is also an issue. You're talking about professionals and you're trying to work with a proctoring company and a testing company and finding a slot that can work on your schedule. And then if you think about a lot of these high stakes exams, again, I'll mention doctors, their schedule can change. Or if we're working with an EMS group in a firehouse, there's lots of different things that pull on those professional schedules that make it a challenge. And then we get into areas of security. It's, when you go into a test center, that area is controlled and you've controlled the environment. But when you have an individual showing up, they're showing up in their home, in their office, or in some other location. And you, as a proctoring company or a testing company, you don't have control over that environment. And so as part of the time of setup is to make sure that area is secure, right? Assuring that candidate only has the resources that are authorized, making sure that there's no other person there assisting, making sure there's no other technologies available for them to reference, or technologies available to monitor the test or record the test, outside of the proctor's purview. So really securing that area is going to take time. In addition to that, there's the computer. They're showing up on their own device. And so that's sort of the other end of the scale, where somebody comes in with significant technical capability and their computer may be set up to do some nefarious things. And we got to make sure that we've set it up so that it meets our requirements and we can secure it. And then just the candidate themselves, right? They're stressed out. They're doing different things. They're going to come into that environment unsure or unaware, especially somebody who's doing it for a first time. In the high stakes exam, not only is it high stakes, but it typically it's impacting somebody's career, and that can be very stressful. You already see, all of us are familiar with test anxiety. We all have gone through that at one time or another. And when you get high stakes, that level of anxiety goes way up. So really preparing that candidate for that experience is critical to making sure that we achieve success. So I'll throw it back to you, Nate.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, these are certainly things that we deal with every day in the partnership between MonitoreEDU and Assessment Systems. And we take a tag team approach here, where certain parts of these are focused on Don, such as maintaining the security of the area. So one of the things he does when he checks in candidates is, he'll get, of course, video running with a webcam like this, but also have video running on a phone as a second stream, and then use that, tell the candidate to take their phone and go show around their desk area, whatever they need to do to make sure that the area is closed. Meanwhile, We handle a lot of the other stuff, such as the lockdown browser to maintain the security of the computer, which blocks or blacklists a lot of the software that can be on a computer that could potentially take screenshots or videos. So even having things up like Zoom or Slack on your computer, the lockdown browser will block those things, because Slack, is the software used for messaging, but it does have video capabilities. So the lockdown browser will block that. So those are the types of approaches that we take, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail about some of these strategies in terms of how to address some of those issues. So that's where we're going next. One of the most important ones that we'll talk about is practice tests. So practice tests mean that you get your candidates to go and take a simple 5-question test before their actual test. It can be simple questions like, what color is the sky, or it can be important things about your organization that you want them to know, like ask them questions about what is needed to register for the exam, or what was the year that your organization was founded, or something like that you might want them to know. That's not part of the actual test, but it's still something interesting to keep them engaged with the practice test, rather than just what color is the sky. You could also put a survey there if you wanted to, ask them questions about how was their process with registering for the test? Did they feel that the handbook had enough information? Those types of things. You could put that in the practice test if you want to. I mean, you've got this captive audience here with all your candidates. If you're requiring them to take the practice test, you might as well use that efficiently. This is good for that, but it's also there's 2 reasons to have people do the practice tests. One is to become familiar with the process, and that they understand what is taken to get checked in. They understand about getting the dual camera, 2 video streams going, what it's like to get that up and running. So they're all used to that sort of thing, and then that greatly reduces the potential of problems on the day that they check in, and also reduces any potential anxiety, because we want them to, again, the whole purpose of this is to maximize the probability of success on the exam. Anxiety and being flustered is going to definitely impact that. So if they know that they're able to get the lockdown browser installed and get both video cameras up and running because they did that 3 days ago for your practice test, that's going to make them feel a lot better when they're ready to log in to take the actual test.
Totally agree. It's part of me actually wanted to put the practice test underneath the common issues section, because quite frankly, it just solves a majority of everything that you deal with. So it comes down to actual test day, and there's been no practice tests. I don't consider it really adding to the stress of the testing experience as much as it multiplies the stress of the testing experience. So the simplisticness of coming by what you said 3 days beforehand, you launch everything up, all the systems that are required. It's actually a great idea too, with a practice test being, what is and is not allowed for the test. Interestingly enough, we talk about this as if it's a prerequisite for a lot, but a lot of what we do is the comparison back to that classroom. Before you had a big test, when you were in, your elementary school grades going up, your teacher let you know the day before, what was going to be happening during test time, the materials that you were and were not allowed. And all of this was done beforehand, so that when you got in there, you knew what to expect. And when you know what to expect, you're much less likely to be nervous about it. So if you've never done anything before, you're connecting up for the first time. If it's your first time remote testing at all, that can be even exponentially more nerve-wracking. And then to put that together, if you have any technical issues and then you can't actually, so needless to say, it can compound quickly, when simply enough coming by a few days before to do a practice session when there's no time constraints and a expert on the other end to help you walk through it, takes a lot of pain out of the process.
Yeah, and we've got some real examples of that. We've got a client that tests with assessment systems and Monitor EDU, and these are some high stakes college English proficiency tests. And this particular client, we noticed, we've been doing these probably, Nate, 3-4 years now. We've been working with a particular client, and during the testing periods, there were a lot of issues that came up. So a lot of these testers are in other countries using equipment. They've got firewalls, other barriers that are put in the way of trying to run a successful testing program. And what a lot of people don't think about, not only the testers' stress level, but it's also the proctor and the testing organization, because there was so much time spent during the test process of us communicating with the testing sponsor on issues that were coming up. But, a student was unable to get in, they would contact them, they would contact us, and we'd spend all this time while we're trying to administer that test, trying to resolve issues because of different technical issues or other issues that can come up. And so, we had a meeting, discussed it, realized that the best tactic was to go ahead and implement these practice exams, and it's completely smoothed out the process. All of those things that we went through in test day, we're not going through anymore. We're taking care of those things ahead of time, 2 or 3 days ahead of time. And in some cases, a student will come in and their equipment's not working. So then we give them an opportunity, some advice on how to fix the technical issues, and then they can come back again and test, pre-test that equipment out again with a live proctor, somebody who can help them with the technical support and really understand what the issue is. And so not only does this significantly reduce the stress and anxiety, and it significantly increases the efficiency of the whole process, because it allows us to get that test taker in when they're supposed to test, and it cuts down on all of the time that we're spending on test day trying to manage those issues, because we front load that, and then the testing organization, the proctoring organization, we can all focus on administering the test on test day. So it has tremendous advantages.
Don brings up a great point there, that when you're doing live proctoring, the proctor is also your tech support rep at the same time, which is not the same as when you're doing automated proctoring. You then have to call a tech support rep if you're having issues. But by doing a practice test this way, you're essentially getting a free consultation with tech support to make sure that you're able to lock down or install the lockdown browser, get your video streams up and running, whatever it is that you have to do to get the test up and running. Having that available beforehand, it just makes it so much smoother on exam day.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the single most, of all these things that we're going to talk about, that's the single most important thing that really helps with testing programs to really reduce stress. And there's this list has a number of other items. It comes down to really preparing the candidate for what that test day experience is going to be like. What are their requirements? What is the equipment requirement? And you can give them a list of all those things and have them go through it and read it, but it helps so much for them to actually test it live, so they can make sure that it complies. Because they may not understand. They may not understand, hey, you can't have all these processes running in the background because that's going to interfere with the lockdown browser. So you can tell somebody that, but if they don't understand what's under the hood, they're not going to know what to shut off. And so now they're working with somebody live, and they can advise them, hey, the program says shut these things down. I notice you're running these other programs. You need to shut those things down. And that way, when they come to test day, they're prepared, and we can get into that test much quicker.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it does get pretty involved. Like I know I mentioned earlier, Slack with the lockdown browser, it's not enough just to close Slack, because if you close Slack, there's still a process running underneath the hood on your Windows machine to launch Slack again when you're ready. And the lockdown browser will actually detect that and try to stop it. So you need to be able to have someone who's technologically knowledgeable and has done this before to help with those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
Another good example is examining prep materials. So here we're talking about FAQs, candidate handbooks, pages on your website, letting them know of all the things that they need to know ahead of time, even before they go take the practice test. Here's what's allowed during your test. Here's what's not allowed. Here's what to expect when you show up. Make sure that you have a camera or a tablet with an HD video if you're going to have the second stream running. Whatever those types of things are. You should define all of your rules beforehand, which is one of the last things I have in the list here. So you as the test sponsor, when you work with Monitor.edu, you're able to customize your rules. Do you allow this textbook as a reference, or certain tables of numbers that they need to use? Are they allowed bathroom breaks? Are they allowed bathroom breaks at very specific times? Whatever your rules are, you define those ahead of time and provide them to the proctors, but then you also provide those to the candidates, so the candidates know what to expect as well too. Okay, it's going to be a 3-hour exam, but you're going to get 100 items, then a bathroom break, and then another 100 items, or something like that. You got to define all these things ahead of time. Make sure that they're up on your website or candidate handbook or something else, so that they, even before the practice test, they're familiar with some of those rules.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's giving them the resources at the beginning, letting them know what to expect. You talk about the room. Like I just look at our backgrounds right now. If you take a look at what Nate's got, he's got, when I'm looking at, that's the kind of room that we're very comfortable with, because he doesn't have a lot of things on the walls. It's very clean and organized. Again, in a test center, you control that, but when you're doing remote testing, you don't. And so it's okay to put specific requirements on what the room needs to look like. And we've even created a video that we send to candidates ahead of time saying, this is how to set up your room. We'll have them, if they've got pictures on the wall or they've got a bookcase behind them, we'll have them actually take a sheet and cover those things. And the reason is because we don't know what's within all those books. We don't have the time to inspect everything. We don't know if they've got some camera back there, a listening device, something else that's there. We want to be able to make that room as clean as possible so that the proctor can really focus on the tester in the test area. One of the things that we have on here is that second camera. That's also a very important element for really achieving success. This front view that we've all got, all of those familiar with proctoring, this really doesn't give us everything we need to know. So even though I can see Nate and he's got a really clean background, I don't know what's to his right or his left. I don't know what's on the other side of the computer. And so sorry about that. There we go. I thought I had my phone on silent, but it's connected to my computer. So the computer was ringing. So it's important to have that second camera to be able to view that whole room area and go through it. Also, if you're going to use a second camera, it's important to let the candidate know ahead of time how to place that camera, because we're going to want to be able to place it in an area of the room that we've got a really good view of the desk area, the work area, and we've gone through all that. So providing them details on how to do that is important. Again, it's about providing all that information ahead of time, really specifying what the requirements are, so when they come to the test, they're ready and their room is ready to proceed.
Don? James, any other additional comments?
Yeah, I think we can all relate to how well things run when expectations have properly been set beforehand. So that 10 times applies with our testing too. We've even seen implemented with some of our clients what we kind of call a test taker guide, if you will. And it can be a simple little PDF put together with a lot of what you've highlighted, simple videos that show how to set up the cameras, FAQs for them to be able to get their questions answered, and then also stuff that might be pertinent to their specific test. And then most importantly, a link to connect right with us. So this can be something that is used as a resource that can be done beforehand, because that's also something you can do practice tests with. And then again, when we see these organizations implement these drive-by test runs beforehand, everything goes a lot smoother when the students or the test takers now fully understand and expect and know what's going to happen when they come to tests.
Yeah, that's a good point about the videos. So MonitorEDU does have some videos on their YouTube channel about what to expect, where to put your camera in the back of the room, those types of things that are great to give your candidates. But there's also no reason that you as a test sponsor couldn't make your own video. It's not that hard to get some video recording free software and make a 5-minute video of yourself talking about the rules and what to expect and that sort of thing. And that would be a great resource for the candidates.
Yeah, I used to, when I was teaching in the classroom, I used to say that you need to deliver content 3 different ways for somebody to grasp it. I don't know, as a psychometrician, you know way more than I do about that, but I know in my classroom experience, I can lecture about it, they can read about it, but then they also needed to go through some type of exercise. And that way there was at least 3 different ways that they were going over the same content. So you can think about this the same way, providing it to them in a written form, providing it to them in a video form, and then doing that practice test. That gives them 3 different opportunities to learn what they need to know about what the testing experience is going to be.
Excellent. So next one is on-demand testing whenever the candidate is ready to go in, which addresses some of the possible scheduling issues. So there are some remote proctoring providers that are entirely scheduling based. Like you have to log in 2 weeks ahead of time and say, I'm going to take this test at 10:30 on Saturday, or whatever slot that the candidate picks, because they have a limited pool of proctoring resources. They want to make sure that that pool is maximized for margin purposes. But MonitorEDU and Assessment Systems takes a different approach in that we have on-demand testing whenever. The candidate can just go to ascproctor.com, pick their organization from a list of the organizations we work with, and then they're immediately kicked off on a chat with Proctor to go ahead and actually take the exam, get set up and everything else. But they can do this at any time. So like if they get home from work and they want to take a half-hour nap before they take their exam or study for a little bit first, whatever it is that they need to do, they don't have to show up right at 6 p.m. to take their test if that's when they were thinking they needed to. They could come in at 6:18, they could come in at 7, they could come in at 9 if they wanted to take their exam. Don, you want to speak a little more about that approach?
Yeah, we've got multiple approaches. That one works really, really well. When we talk about those professional groups, we talk about doctors, we talk about EMS, we talk about any industry where their work schedule is going to change, right? It's dynamic based on what's going on, and it's important to be able to serve that entire cohort group. They may not be able to come in and take that test at 3 o'clock on Saturday because something happens that interferes with that, and so that does a lot, both from reducing that test anxiety and also making sure that we can get those testers in, and make sure that we don't have a candidate who something happens at 3 o'clock and they're unable to test and they show up at 5 o'clock and now we have to deal with what do we do with a candidate that's 2 hours late, and we've got to go through those different protocols. And so that allows a lot of flexibility to make sure, again, the focus there is getting them in to test and test successfully. Now, you still, for security reasons, want to have relatively small windows or a very, very large test test bank, right, Nate? But there's some security concerns you have to think about. But in terms of the scheduling, that opens things up and allows us greater flexibility to get everybody in. And then we have some models even where we'll set a test window. So we'll take a look at that security effort and say, okay, we want everybody to take this test. They can start within a 3-hour window because the test is 3 hours. And then what we'll do is if somebody starts right at the beginning of the test, we'll sequester them for that entire time. So therefore, everybody has started the test before anybody has left the area. And so we can sort of combine that flexible window to allow everybody to get in along with some of the security needs. So there's a lot of different models that we can set up that really address that scheduling issue. And again, reduce the amount of stress and allow us then to be much more successful. Our goal is to test 100% of the people that show up and meet all the requirements. And these are things that help us do that.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the things you would put underneath the pros aspect of remote proctoring. It's the convenience. It's kind of comes with the expectation of having the remote option. So, and also I think we've got our first couple questions that have come in too, by the way. So, Don, if you want to grab both of those and they pertain to
I'll let Nate play administrator on that.
Oh, okay, sounds perfect.
I gotta stop sharing to go back.
But it's a good time. Yeah, let's take some questions.
Right. So first question, dual camera and variably ends up with personal equipment to be used, smartphone or other device. Usually the candidate's main machine has no issues to interact with the software, but other devices potentially encounter problems. How well has using only one device been for you?
So one device, my recommendation on one device is fine as long as that device is an external camera. The biggest issue is, so you're looking at me right now, this doesn't give me a good view to proctor. I can have screen sharing programs, I can have lockdowns, but I don't know. There could be somebody sitting right over here, right? I can take my phone out, right? Stick it on my keyboard and it's going to look like I'm typing and I can be looking up answers. So that's the biggest issue. People tend to rely on one camera to have that front facing view. You really need to have a side facing view to be able to see the area and see what they're doing. We've defined proctoring as the ability to see the candidate, but you also have to see what they're doing. And you can't really see what they're doing if all you see is their face in front of a camera.
Totally agree. And there's certainly potential issues with using an additional piece, but the way that we work is that it doesn't have to install an app on the phone or the tablet. It's run off a URL within a browser. So as long as the smartphone or tablet is able to run a browser and has a video camera, we're able to get that video stream running. So the tech support with having that second camera has been minimal, correct?
That's correct. I mean, I mean, cell phones are amazing. You think about the cameras and the advances. If you take a look at the number, there's something like 300 million cell phones now in the U.S. There's 3.5, 4 billion cell phones that exist globally. So it's an incredibly common device. The cameras on these are fantastic. Most of the internet access that's available out there is very high speed. And as you said, Nate, we've done everything we can to make sure that we're using simplified technologies. So we can run it on basically a standard HTML browser that runs video. There are some clients that will use meeting applications but those are just running apps. Somebody told me the other day, people have a big issue trying to load extensions on their computer or different software on their computer, but they'll load an app without an issue. And so even if you have to run an app, typically those are very easy to install, and most of the user base out there is very comfortable. But again, another thing that wasn't really on the list, or at least I don't think it was in my notes, is flexibility. And so it's the ability to we get into that situation. Let's say they do have a problem with their cell phone, or they just dropped it and it broke. That external camera could be a different device, just a device that's got, a good camera, internet access, and that's mobile enough that we can move around, because it's important to be able to place that camera where the proctor thinks it needs to be within the room, so they've got the nice view. We don't want the candidate to always determine where that camera is going to be. The proctor needs to get them to move it. But you can use an additional laptop, you can use an iPad, you can use a number of different pieces of equipment to be able to affect that. Again, the big thing coming out of COVID, right? We all went to video meetings and video. Everybody's used to that now, and the technology is there to enable it. So let's use that technology so that we're able to monitor the student.
Absolutely. Second question was, guessing that this open scheduling approach is related to AI remote proctoring and not human proctoring. Have you seen any difference between AI and human proctoring? Well, I'd like to address the first part of that question first. And the open scheduling you're talking about is actually for human proctoring. If we have clients that come in that want to do it, like 500 candidates at the exact same time at 9 a.m. on Saturday, yes, we ask them to schedule that ahead of time with us, because we want to make sure that the proctor team is prepared, my support team is prepared, those sorts of things. But when you're talking about exams that are live proctoring, but we need to be flexible with their time, like Don was saying, you've got doctors that we work with, or EMTs, they need that flexibility to come in anytime in the evening to take their exam, and we provide that flexibility to them.
Yeah, it's interesting, Nate, because it's, when I've been doing this a long time, and when we first set up original proctoring, we thought, well, it makes sense. You have a proctor, you have a candidate, you schedule them up, you line everything up, and it's efficient. What I found over the years is actually that wasn't as efficient as it appears to be. It's actually a lot more efficient to look at a sort of a call center model, where you look at peak demand periods. You try to run some algorithms to line up your test proctors with what your candidate flow is going to be, because you get a nice even candidate flow. With a schedule, somebody comes in and they've got something scheduled at 10 and they show up at 9:40. You've got a 20-minute problem, right, on how you deal with that candidate. When you use open flow, that kind of comes in, as long as the rules of the test allow it to start at 9:40 or 9:45, you can just flow right through and get that candidate set up and testing. In addition to that, many of our proctors work from their home offices, and so that gives us tremendous flexibility. So even though we spend a lot of time planning and scheduling that, if we do run into a situation where our queue starts to build up and people are waiting a little bit, we throw a call out there, and we've got people starting in 5 minutes. They don't have to drive down the street; they can just fire it up. And so it's been incredibly efficient. I know when I set this up back in 2018, that was all theory in my head, but we've really seen that play out, where it's very few times where we run into issues. And open scheduling, from my perspective, is actually a lot easier to manage than actual schedule. So it's counterintuitive, but it actually works incredibly well, and you don't need an automated program to do it. So it's really tried and true processes that come out of the call center models.
Yeah, and I can say, as someone who's essentially a client of Don, and that I work with him on providing my exam delivery clients, this has been a great success with my clients. They're all very happy with that approach as well. Now, the second part of that question is a lot bigger one, is difference between AI and human proctoring. Don, I know, could go on for that for a couple days, as could I. We had past webinars on it. So if you go look at our Assessment Systems YouTube channel, we have had past webinars specifically talking about this. We had some AI vendors come in and talk with Don there as well, too, going back and forth. Those would be really helpful. But Don, can you provide a quick summary?
Yeah, I mean, the quick answer is, have you seen any differences? Yes. There are differences. And again, the real focus is what's appropriate and where it's appropriate. With the higher stakes exams, it's really important to have that human element within it, that live customer support, customer proctoring process. I think supplemented by AI works incredibly well in addition, but relying solely on that for really high stakes, high stress. If you think about all the things, the points that we've talked about, many of those require that human handholding, that human intervention, that human support. And so from that standpoint, you really ought to consider, building humans into that particular process. But there's certainly, and again, our other webinars cover these great, there's certainly applications where we're running that, record and review or AI generated proctoring makes a lot of sense. Again, we could go into that in some other webinars and invite you to those as we do them.
Absolutely. We'll schedule some follow-up webinars, hopefully.
Yeah.
Third question, do you utilize in-house proctoring software, or do you recommend a good value vendor with API? Don, can you explain a little bit about your tech approach?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, what I talked about earlier is the flexibility. We proctor on probably 7 or 8 different platforms now, depending on the client, going as simple as using simple HTML5, video software, all the way through to using meeting platforms to actual proctoring software. So we've got a couple of companies that we work with. There is there are a significant number of vendors out there that have very solid, high quality proctoring software. There's a few that both Nate and I work with. The one that comes to mind is a company called Sumati, is one of our favorite partners on the technology side. We've also worked with others in the past. We've worked with Proctor Exam. That was a very good product. So there's a number of them, and I'm sure if I start naming them off, I'm going to leave a bunch of them out. But it's really a matter of sitting down and looking at what your needs are and finding the best blend of humans, what type of software you need, how you want to deploy that. As Nate mentioned earlier, part of the strategy, especially with the higher stakes exams, is to run it with a secure browser, and how that secure browser integrates with what you're doing on the proctoring side is very important. And in many cases, you want to simplify the video tools as much as you can so that they don't interfere with that secure browser. So there's a lot of factors that are involved with all of that. So I'm kind of rambling a little bit now, Nate, so I'll let you rescue me on this.
Sure. Yeah, I agree that there's a bunch of vendors out there. And the thing that surprised me most when I first started looking at remote proctoring vendors was the range of possibilities in the market. That they do actually differ quite a bit in terms of AI versus recorded review versus live versus a mix of those things. They differ substantially in the quality of their technology, or being technology agnostic like they are with MonitorDU, where they can work with other platforms. So that if you're shopping for a proctoring solution, there's quite a bit of shopping to do.
And ironically enough, I've somewhat considered that, as opposed to having in-house proctoring software, we just have in-house proctoring people. And the flexibility that comes from having just trained professional proctors is what does allow us to be able to operate on really any platform that's thrown our way. And sometimes we deal with customers who may unfortunately come to us with their backs against the wall, and they have a system set up in place, but they just need actual people to proctor, as opposed to have a new process implemented that then requires training and then getting everybody up to speed in that regard. So being able to sound the horn and have people who are professional proctors who can hop on, who can who can proctor on any type of platform and are very good and skilled at being able to run through the commonalities that all of them do share, securing the test environment, making sure the right person's taking the right test, just like you would in that classroom. Quite frankly, we found a lot more value in those people than we have in in a proprietary software, which we do have our own video driver stuff that allows us to handle that part of it too. We just tend to not rock the boat when somebody has a process already in place, and we're just here to add the proctoring assistance that's needed.
Great description. Thank you. I'll share my screen back, and we can return to the list of talking points here.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Right.
I was thinking probably, Nate, a really good area to talk about is privacy and privacy expectations. I mean, I think you referenced the Cleveland State issue, right, and the issue of room scans and how we address privacy. So I'll throw it back to you for a moment, and then I'll be happy to chime in.
I don't think we went deeply into dual camera approach, but we did when talking about the QA and how to use the second camera in terms of what devices were necessary and that sort of thing. So let's skip ahead to room scans and NDA, which get into the privacy piece here. So in room scans, what we're talking about is when you have that dual camera approach, you got the webcam going here, you can't really move that. But yes, you tell them to pick up their phone and ask them to show everything that they should be showing based upon the rules that you as a test sponsor identify. So it could just be the work area, tell them to show like this, but you can also tell them to show underneath the desk, to show the rest of the room, show that they've got a closed door. Whatever it is, rules that you want to specify, we can put that into the proctoring process and make sure that we use that dual camera room scan to accomplish that. And that's what Don was talking about. With a test center, you're assured that the environment is standardized and clear. We don't know that's the case with remote proctoring, and that's where we have them scan the whole room, see that there's a bookcase, ask them to cover the bookcase with a sheet or something like that.
Yeah, it's important that they know going in how that room should be set up. When we talk about privacy, I mean, cover the things that are private. But I think from you mentioned an NDA, it's really setting the expectations up front. It's so that they know what to expect. And one of the important points too is they are choosing where they're testing, right? Even though we give them the specifications, so we say, look, it's got to be a private room, it's got to be uncluttered. You need to have certain things covered up. No one else can be there. We need to understand where the doors and windows, the light has to be a certain way. I mean, there's a really long list of things that we expect in terms of specifications on that. But it's also important to note that they choose. Nowhere are we saying you must test in your bedroom, or you must test in your kitchen, or you must test at home. We're saying just that it has to be a private room. And so I think when you look at privacy issues, part of that Cleveland State issue was that particular student didn't feel like he had any other choices. There were lots of issues within the case also related to COVID and testing and masks and that as well. But it's important to make sure you provide the understanding so they know going in what the expectations are. Make sure they understand that they're choosing that room and that place has to have specification, has to meet the specifications. I like the idea of an NDA, but we also cover those things in our privacy policy. And it's important to, within your privacy policy, to make sure they understand that that video is specific use video, right? It's not being used for anything else other than that particular test, and make sure they're adhering to the rules, and that it's only the testing company has access to that, right? And we'll only have access to that for a limited time. Once it's no longer needed, it's deleted. So those are things you need to put in your NDA or put into your privacy policy to make sure that that those privacy fears are addressed. And then the last thing is providing options to that particular student. Having some type of way for them to test elsewhere. It's not always feasible to also have a test center option, but that can help in those situations where you've got that candidate who absolutely feels like there's a privacy issue. However, what I will say too is that that particular certification or test is a requirement of that particular program, and they know that going in. To a certain extent, they accept all of the things that go along with that. So there is a limit to how many options you should provide them, but you do need to make sure that they understand going in that they're making the choice, they're setting it up, they're doing all the things. They're, to a certain extent, responsible for protecting their own privacy as it relates to how that test is administered, if that makes sense.
And a lot of that comes up with the examinee prep material so that they know what to expect about. They're going to be in a personal room. Make sure you cover things that are personal if that's what you want to do. For those of you who aren't aware, the Cleveland State issue was a lawsuit that happened last year, or at least it was finalized last year, at Cleveland State University in the United States, where they were remote proctoring an exam for students in their dorm room, but they didn't use professional exam proctoring service like MonitorEDU. They just used Zoom, and they didn't go through a lot of the things that we're talking about here in terms of having a privacy policy, letting people know that they're going to have video recorded of them in their dorm room, provide an option to come take it in a library instead. There's so many things that they could have done to smooth this operation that just weren't done because I think it was during COVID and they didn't have all these formal policies in place and they just scrambled to start delivering exams, which is unfortunate in retrospect. But it's a good example of what not to do. Now we've got this great example of what not to do. Look at the things that they were sued over in Cleveland State. Make sure you cover those things yourself.
Yep, it's again preparing that candidate on what to expect, because then you get rid of those arguments. We're not Big Brother. We're not forcing ourselves to do that. We don't have some secret camera in your bedroom that's watching you, right? You're making the choice, and you need to take this particular test. There are rules that are associated with how that test is delivered, and you're agreeing to that by taking that test. So there's lots of legal precedent on that side of it, but it's also about making sure that you're set up and you're clean and you're doing all the things that you can do to reemphasize to that candidate that these are the expectations, these are the requirements, and if you follow them, you won't have any issues.
And regarding privacy, Don, what is your policy on recording video of the candidates?
So we recommend recording. It's always at the option of the institution. So our clients can tell us not to record if that's what they want, and we can turn recording off. But we typically record everything because it's much better in those situations where there is an issue to be able to have that video evidence to be able to deal with whatever that issue is. But our policy towards that is that it's stored on our servers. It's access to that is significantly limited, even internally. Only the client has access. Their access is limited, basically to only those people in need. Any video that has an issue will transfer that video file over to the client and becomes their property at that point. And then we delete all videos under standard policy after 90 days. So we don't keep those. So it's really, that video has a specific use. And once that use is no longer valid, then there's no reason for us to have that video.
Awesome. Thanks, Don. So next on the list of strategies to address this is ability to pause and restart exams in the delivery engine. And there's two reasons for this. One is intentional stops, and the other reason is unintentional stops. So intentional stops are if there's bathroom breaks, or if you see somebody cheating literally, taking pictures with their cell phone. You should have connection to the exam delivery platform to not just stop the proctoring, but actually stop the exam so they can stop taking pictures of all the questions. And then there's the unintentional breaks of power goes out, internet goes out, those sorts of things. What do? You should have policies, procedures in place for how to deal with that. So the exam platform and the proctoring system should be able to get somebody back and running. So if the power goes out, comes back half hour later, they can log in back in where they left off. The timer's still running where the timer left off. Whatever things you have in place like that are still in place. So I think that's really important to plan for as well. Make sure that you've got a solution in place.
Yeah, and there's lots of things beyond what we just think about as opportunities to pause that exam. Again, we've all got all the security issues, and it's important to have control over that exam to address those. If anything nefarious is happening, we can stop that exam, make sure that there's no more content being delivered. We can protect the exam, we can protect the content. But there's also those other things that happen in a dynamic environment. It's the parent that's at home and there's a big crash in the background and a baby starts screaming and they suddenly have to leave their desk area. In working with the test sponsor, we may decide the best thing to do is just to pause that exam, right? And give them the opportunity to deal with whatever that crisis is. Fire alarm going off. One of the big ones, we use multiple cameras. You get the redundancy in that. What happens if that second camera fails? We still have them on the first camera. That's great. Sometimes the best way to get the candidate's attention is just to pause the exam. And that way we can get them to reset those things, get everything reorganized. So there's lots of things outside of things that are nefarious that are important to be able to do that. Again, because you don't control the environment, and they may not totally control the environment. They may be testing in a room and there's other people in that building that may just pop in. So that ability really to have full administration over that test, full administration rights, to be able to stop it and to be able to be integrated with the software to be able to do that. I mean, we're integrated. I mean, we work closely with assessment systems. We have the ability to stop that. And we have that same ability with many other test providers as well. But that's definitely a critical component in making sure that you can run a successful test.
I really agree with that. It's the same concept, and we go over and over again on the proctoring side of it and how we relate this back to the classroom environment. And the two examples that come up right there, if it was in person and you were caught cheating with using extra materials, you're normally asked to stop taking that test immediately and leave the room. And then also there's been times where I know for a fact, I remember taking a test during my days of school and a fire alarm going off and literally having to take a pause and everyone exit the building and then come back in and then finish the test. So these are things where, when in doubt, we replicate what that classroom environment is like in that 2-camera model with the redundancy built into it really allows us to do that just like you would if you were in a classroom.
Next one on the list is having a knowledgeable support team. So what we're talking about here is not just the proctors having the support there, but also the test delivery vendor, like in this case myself, and at the test sponsor, which is you, making sure that those 3 organizations are connected in whatever is necessary for delivering the exam smoothly. If you've got exam days, like you've got 200 people showing up on Saturday to take the exam, make sure you're all prepared on all 3 of those points, because you're going to have potential issues, people logging in at the wrong time, hour early, hour late, whatever it is. There's so many different things that can go wrong. And then, we've got a dedicated Slack channel between Don's team and mine. There's frequently things going on there too, like candidates show up to take the test and they haven't actually registered to take the test yet. So then they have to then go back to the test sponsor, and the test sponsor says, no, you have to go register for the test and you have to submit your diploma first and get approved. So it can be really simple things like that, and not nefarious things at all, but you've got to have a support team and processes in place for those.
Yeah, I mean, it's sometimes people say it takes a village. We're not raising children here, but it does still take the village. It takes that cooperation between the 3 entities, and we do that very well. Where we're coordinated among the test sponsor, test delivery, NAICS group, and our team, so that we can have a successful administration, because it's dynamic. Things come up. A candidate may get frustrated and they contact the test sponsor. Well, immediately they can get back to our team and Nate and say, well, this is what really happened, and we can make a real-time decision on how to handle it with that particular testing candidate. Again, moving us more towards that 100% success rate in terms of getting everybody in. And making sure that those entire teams are knowledgeable, so that the test sponsor, the test administrator, and the proctoring company all are aware of what's going on, and it makes it much easier to triage problems and solve them quickly. So it makes a huge difference up and down the entire chain.
Yeah, and my last point here is to take all these things that we talked about and discuss them beforehand and make sure that you establish these policies. And you're welcome to lean on Don or whoever your test proctoring provider is to talk about these things. Make sure you understand what their software, their proctors can do, and get policies in place. Make sure that the proctors are aware of them, the test delivery vendor is aware of them, your administrative staff, the test sponsor is aware of them, that everything is in place to maximize the success on exam delivery day.
Yep.
All right, let's check if we've got any more Q&A.
Had a couple good ones earlier.
Those were good questions earlier. I don't see any additional ones right now. So if you have any Q&A, please drop them in here. Otherwise, you're welcome to send emails to us. Actually, let me go back to sharing the screen here. So if you have questions for us, there's our email addresses. You can also get in touch with us through LinkedIn or through our company websites. Put in inquiry. So if we don't have additional time here, we're coming up on the hour to cover any Q&As here, but you're welcome to submit questions to us, and we'll be happy to discuss them with you and help find a positive solution.
Awesome.
And those are 3 pretty easy email addresses. So
yeah, easy enough.
All right. With that, I'd like to thank all the attendees. Thank you for taking time out of your work day to attend this webinar. Hopefully it was helpful to us. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch. We'll be posting this video on the web on YouTube. So if you have any colleagues you think that would benefit from this as well too, you're welcome to share it.
Awesome. Thanks for
And lastly, I'd like to thank Don and James for spending some time on here and sharing their expertise. They're the ones that are really experienced with remote proctoring.
our pleasure. Thanks, Nate.
Thanks again, Nate. Appreciate all your help and assistance.
You're very welcome. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you on the next webinar.
Take care.